Streaming for the third time's a charm.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to cut this one short.
Yeah, well, maybe. Who knows? Alright. How about now? Can we hear us now?
Yeah. Okay, I need a drink.
Yeah, I can't hear you on the stream. And of course, can't hear you on the stream. And of course, it's charm. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to. Okay. Yep. I think we're good. All right.
Perfect.
All right. Good enough. Yeah. If we get a viewer, they'll tell us. I really don't even care right now. Holy crap.
Let's just do it.
Yo, hey, welcome to the Forwards or Less podcast, where we've been banging our heads up against the walls for the last 45 fucking minutes trying to get this stream going. So glad whoever tuned in is tuned in. I'm Sam again, and I'm the blue logo on the right.
I'm Justin, and I'm the red logo on the left. Let's get into it.
Yep. So what do you got today?
What
are we going to? We got our title is Tradition, Conservation, and Odd Land Rights. So what's that all about?
Right. Well, so I came across this quote earlier today about tradition, and I thought it described it really well. So it said that tradition is designed to preserve the flame, keep the fire alive, right? It's not there to stir the ashes. And I think that it's something that a lot of people don't really think about when they talk about tradition, right? There's a lot of talk about preserving the old ways, but why are we preserving them? Is it because they're old? No, it's because they're valuable. It's because they provide something.
Sure, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of people do want to stir the pot and just get the fire going.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so I've got a friend of mine. I just got married, as you know. You were there.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got married. Weddings are chock full of tradition, right? A ring's a tradition. The bouquet is a tradition. The garter's a tradition. The choice of a best man is a tradition. And I looked into some of this with my wife after we got married. We were looking into, some of the meetings of like, why did we even do that, So we were looking at like the best man. So traditionally,
best man's a fun one.
The best man's the fun one. So the best man. So you choose the best man because he was supposed to be the one, and you choose a man with good swordsmanship skills because he was supposed to beat off the attackers who would want to end the wedding or steal your bride or even do other things to your bride before the wedding. So I chose wisely is what my best man said when I sent him that screenshot of that paragraph. That was pretty good.
Honestly, too, I think we need to bring back this tradition. Like, the best man should just be strapped with a couple of dueling pistols, and anyone that wants to interrupt the ceremony can go outside.
Right, exactly. That's what it's for. So he's there to make sure it actually happens. No douchebaggery allowed. I will shoot you. So like the rings are tradition. Think about this, is for like thousands of years we didn't wear jewelry. Jewelry was for royals only. And it used to be that you would just do some kind of tie together a cloth, and it was a bond and kind of a covenant that you would enter with your wife. And now we have a show of it and a symbol of your commitment to each other. But how much of tradition per se in a wedding do you think is just fabricated by the wedding industry?
There's a whole bunch of it, and not just the wedding itself, but also the engagement and all that. Like, diamond wedding rings weren't a tradition until I think it was the mid 1920s, and that was perpetuated by a massive advertising campaign from the DeBeers Corporation. They made the diamond wedding ring. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah,
the wedding arrangements.
There was some kind of wedding article that was put out by that corporation or something. They wrote an article in a magazine in the 1920s or something like that that said, how much should you pay for a wedding ring? And it said, it should be 2 weeks' pay. Yeah, that's really interesting. You shouldn't have to have these things just to show your love and commitment for one another. You shouldn't have to have those things, but we do. And
Yep.
I don't know. I
Better or
kind
for
of.
worse.
What do you think? Should you just cut out the crap out of your wedding, or should you just roll with it unless you have a reason not to?
Oh, I tell you, and my future wife's gonna hate me. I am going to be absolutely merciless when it comes to pruning all that garbage out.
You think so?
Like,
Because I
oh
got a
yeah,
friend of mine. He's not even picking a best man.
yeah. I don't know. I kind of like some of the social stuff. Like, I'll probably do a best man. I may not do a full host of groomsmen. Like a dozen
Yeah,
people
just like
or
I
whatever.
did.
But yeah. Like we'll do a best man and a maid of honor.
Mhm.
But a lot of the stuff like the big, massive $10,000 flower arrangements,
Just having like
and
less of a wedding party cuts down on cost too, because
tremendously, yeah, especially when you factor in the rehearsal.
Yeah, your friends don't have to buy dresses for if they're
Yep.
brides. What do they call them?
Bridesmaids
We didn't do bridesmaids.
Bridesmaids and groomsmen, yeah.
There's the maid of honor, and there's
The bridesmaids, and then
is
there's
that it? Yeah. Okay.
the best man and the groomsman.
Mhm.
You just did this, right? Come on.
Yeah, but we didn't have them. We just had
Yep.
the maid of honor and the best man. So, yeah, cuts down on cost for sure. You don't have to help anybody with that. They can wear whatever the heck they want. They can show up at whatever time they want to. You get to sleep in. My bride got to sleep in because she didn't have to get there at 7 a.m. because it was just her and the maid of honor.
Yep.
So it doesn't take them that long to get all the makeup done and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, man. I kind of come from the idea that don't kick the hornet's nest and just go with a good thing unless you have a reason not to.
Yeah. Well, my whole thing is it's just I'm going to prune in terms of cost because I want the money to be spent where it matters. There are some things like I want to have as many, friends and family there. What?
The booze.
Yeah, well, you best believe I'm going to have an open bar at my
That's
wedding.
where it matters, right?
Yes, sir. The food, the drink, and I want to be able to get everyone on the guest list in, right? Because the more heads you have, the more expensive it is. But I want to be able to share the day with, all of my friends and family that are important and not have to prune the guest list so much. And you can do that, if you don't spend a bunch of money on invitations and flower arrangements and stuff like that. But,
Yep.
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 There are certain places where I believe the money would be better spent than others. I'll put it like that.
Yep. Somewhere where I thought was something worth splurging on was, definitely the rings. And that
Yeah.
matters to me. And in that sense, the symbology of that truly, truly mattered to me. I think the symbology of my ring mattered to me more than my wife's ring, dare I say. But I was looking into rings, and I'm kind of a rustic kind of guy, and I was looking at these wooden banded rings, and I thought to myself, well, what you're putting into the ring, like what material, and as an engineer I geek out about this stuff, right? What material means the most? Because the ring itself is symbology. So like, what's the point? Practically the only thing that I needed out of it was for it to rip off easy because I'm around heavy machinery pretty often. So if I forget to swap it out for the silicone ring, then I'm going to need something that is soft, on that day that I forget. So I went with gold because of that, and I went with white gold because it matches my wife's ring. And then I saw these wooden inlaid rings, and I was like, that's perfect for me. That's a little bit of personality to it, makes it unique. So it's like, okay, well, what kind of wood do I want to put into it? Because I work with wood a lot for a hobby. Carpentry and stuff like that, woodworking, I would say. Not carpentry, but woodworking. And so I was looking at it, and I said, well, what wood could I put into it that would matter? I've got the metal taken care of. It's the softest, so practically it works. It matches my wife's ring, so it's got that link and connection there. And then I just kept mulling it over. I was like, well, do I want it to be a hardwood or a softwood? Can I put pine in it? No, pine's too soft. Even though I grew up in Georgia, and pine's like really significant in that way. And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, what kind of wood did they make the cross out of? Because there's nothing more significant than that, right? So I ran into something interesting. Apparently, so the cross was made out of dogwood. You still there, by the way? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the cross was made out of dogwood, apparently, which is native to Georgia. You know, you've seen them all over the place, right?
Yeah, we have a whole bunch of it here.
And I come home and I was like, grandmother, you know, I was telling my family and my grandmother, she's around, and I told them, I was like, I got it. I know what I'm going to put in the ring. And I told her, and I told them all, and grandmother said, whoa, 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 whoa. You might want to think twice about putting dogwood in your ring, because apparently God cursed the dogwood tree. I was like, he did what now? I was like, that's not in the Bible. And so I looked into it and I searched it and, you know, checked it out. So apparently God cursed the dogwood tree so that it would never grow in a straight enough form to be used for crucifixion ever again. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he blessed the dogwood tree so that it would bear flowers, and people would look on the tree and be reminded of like the beautiful sacrifice of Christ, right? So I was like, well, that's perfect. I'm not making a cross out of it. I'm putting it in a ring, and it reminds me of, you know, it is meant to remind me of Jesus Christ every time I look at my wedding ring, because to me, that's a bond between me, my wife, and God. So I think that's pretty significant. So yeah, the rings are tradition, and that mattered to me, and I splurged on it a little bit, had it custom made. We cut down a dogwood tree from my parents' front yard that was actually diseased and dying, and my best man helped me cut it down by hand with an axe, and my wife was there, you know, fiance at the time. We cut out a couple of chunks of the tree, and she picked out the prettiest cross section of it that she wanted sent off to this company to be, you know, custom put into a ring. And it worked out. It's a beautiful ring. It really is. And I like it a lot. You'll see it in the pictures, I'm sure, when they come out. I'll send you a couple. I know you're not on social media, and neither am I anymore. Got rid of my social media. Yeah. Finally.
Yeah.
When my brother comes home, I'm getting off Facebook finally. But, yeah. So that's a tradition I splurged on. We did not go with booze. We went the opposite direction. We only did a champagne toast just to kind of satisfy tradition on that one. You feel me? Like, what do you think about that? Just kind of like satisfying tradition to a degree, to where nobody's like bitching about, oh, well, there wasn't this was weird at the wedding, you know?
I don't know. At the end of the day, you know, it's the celebration for you and your wife. Who cares what other people think? You know, there are some traditions I'm willing to accept and some that I won't, you know, just for the sake of it. So, I don't know. I thought you did a pretty good job at blending it. You know, I don't think there was anything that anyone would complain about.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'll probably do something very similar. Like, I'm looking at having a very traditional wedding in a church, but the reception afterwards won't be traditional at all, more than likely.
Yeah, the reception has a lot of tradition in it too, you know, like the garter toss and the bouquet toss and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of weird because, like, my wife had double at the wedding. She had 2 garters on, one and a backup, and then she had 2 bouquets, one that she tossed and one that she took home with her.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. But so what other traditions do you think are still important? Because obviously you valued
Outside of
marriage enough
weddings?
to get married.
Outside of weddings?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah, I don't. The tradition. Yeah, I think it's a tradition that comes from. This one's practical to me. Not living with your spouse before you marry them. I don't believe you should live with your spouse before you marry them. Enjoy your singlehood. You have to form some kind of independence there. I think there are benefits to that. This whole like, oh well, you got to know what they're like before you like. Listen, dude. No, living with them shouldn't be a trial run. You know, that's what marriage is all about. It's a commitment. I don't care if you have disgusting habits. We're going to make it work, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's a bad idea to move in with your significant other before you get married because it can just lead to a lot more headaches when you separate. And ultimately, I think most couples that do that separate at one point or another. And then when you're living with that person, or even you're like bound by a lease to stay there, what happens when you decide that you all of a sudden hate each other or one cheats on the other? Now you're screwed, and you don't have the covenant of marriage binding you together to force you to work things out. You could just split, and things get really, really messy. And financially, it's just not a good idea either. I don't like that idea. I think you need to have somewhere to go by yourself for that. But other tradition, where do you stand on that? Trial run?
I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. I definitely am not a big fan of cohabitation. Like, I could see it maybe if it was a couple months before the wedding and you already had a house. You know, we're just trying to simplify things for logistics' sake.
Yeah, like in my case, where I moved halfway across the country, if we went and got, married in a courthouse and then just had a wedding later for the ceremony purposes and stuff like that, we were thinking about doing that. But
exactly. Like, that would have been, logistically simpler.
Right.
If she hadn't been still finishing school and all that anyway, so.
Right. It didn't take long for us to, the timing worked out.
Yeah, so for that kind of thing, I understand it. But otherwise, I tend to agree with you.
So
now, here's one that I thought was interesting, and I want to hear your opinion on. What do you think of the tradition of organized religion? Because, we both are pretty regular churchgoers, but
now
we've been doing it virtually.
You're hitting a really good one there. I see so my personal belief is, as long as you believe in the same God that I believe in, New Testament and Old Testament, and you believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins on the cross and rose again in 3 days, then beyond that, I care not. Whether you think the Sabbath is on a Saturday or a Sunday, I don't care if you observe certain holy days or fast as part of your religion. I don't care if you have certain traditions, whereas you come from the Catholic Church and you have tons of tradition, right? I didn't grow up with a lot of that. I don't care if you get water baptized or not. I just care that you acknowledged publicly and professed, those beliefs. I think that's what baptism really means, and being saved really means. Is truthfully, baptism, doesn't matter, but being saved is what matters. So beyond that, I don't care. I'll hang out and cut up with and have good conversations with Catholics, Seventh-day Adventists. So I saw this sign coming down the road, and I've never looked into it, and I meant to do a Google search or something like that, but I'm sure you have the answer. And this is popular around where I live now, apparently. Jehovah's Witnesses. What is the difference between them and us? Do they believe in the same God we believe in?
Yes, technically.
I mean, and to be clear, even the Muslim religion believes in the same Old Testament God.
Yes.
But not the New Testament. And the Jews. So same thing there.
So basically, and I will butcher this, I do know a Jehovah's Witness, and she did her best to explain it to me one time. But my understanding of it is that the main difference is the call to evangelization, basically. So
define that. It's a big word.
How do I describe this? Basically, the Jehovah's Witness takes their so first of all, technically they would be another branch of Protestantism. They're not a Trinitarian denomination like Catholics are, where they believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
So they do believe in the same Old Testament?
Yes.
Okay.
And should be the Old Testament and the New Testament.
So you believe in Jesus too?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
And then the Mormons have a lot of weird stuff where they believe, there's not weird stuff. Sorry if you're Mormon. But they believe in a living prophet.
Yeah. But basically, they are run by a council of elders, and they basically are. They also don't believe in the immortality of the soul, and they don't observe a lot of the traditional holidays.
They don't believe in the immortality of the soul?
Correct.
So then what does life in eternity that is promised by God mean to them?
I'm not sure, honestly.
That's kind of weird. If you believe the Old Testament and the New Testament, then that's pretty clear.
Well, you do have to keep in mind that they use their own translation of the Bible, which is a New World translation. So I don't know how different that would be to our traditional Old Testament. I assume that it has the Old Testament doctrines in it, but I would doubt that they are,
Hmm.
shall we say, as faithful
Hmm.
as the translations that you and I read. But their
Interesting.
primary mission, much like Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists, is this evangelization where their primary goal is to go out in the world and recruit more people to the faith, specifically to become witnesses themselves, to continue to grow.
I mean, that kind of takes in that that was one of the commandments Jesus left us with. I think there was only
Yeah.
two. Was one was love your neighbor as as you love yourself and you love God. I butchered that, I know. And then the other is
Go and make disciples from all the
pretty
nations.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they take that mission very seriously.
Yeah.
And that's why they go door to door and distribute literature and have, town halls and all that type of stuff.
I don't know how effective that is.
Yeah, well, especially in the modern day, it's become much less.
So I had heard one time that that the seventh, or sorry, not the Seventh Day Adventists, but that the Jehovah's Witnesses were the ones that leave copies of Bibles in hotel rooms. Then I was corrected on that by my father-in-law this weekend. He said it was some other group.
Well, and it used to be a requirement. I don't know nowadays if there are just groups that do it. That used to be like
a requirement. I don't know if it ever has been a requirement.
No, it used to be like a legal requirement for hotel rooms.
Do you have a Bible in every hotel room?
Yeah, I forget why.
I'm sure that
there was
varied state by state. That's interesting. Man, how do you feel about that, though? Like, what do you think about Christianity being the foundation of our country? Because undeniably it is, as well as the idea of religious freedoms. But, like, the dollar says, in God we trust, How do you balance that with your libertarian views?
Nothing. I wouldn't say I do much balancing at all.
So you're just like straight up, government is secular.
So no, it's not that. It's that. How do I put this? Whether the government had a religious foundation or not, it has a duty to be secular for those that do not follow religious traditions, basically. Because the government has to serve everyone regardless of their personal beliefs.
Okay. So what about things like the idea of God-given rights?
Ultimately, God-given rights do not matter to the state.
But natural rights do, one way or another. I guess it really just depends on how you phrase it, because
Well, and it depends on the government.
And we have an agreed upon document of what the natural human rights are.
Yeah.
But
and it's like
it depends on the government if you recognize that document or not.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do I believe in, God-given rights and natural law? Well, sure. But, the government, at the end of the day, is the ultimate arbitrator of the laws of the land for wherever you live, and they can change them as they wish. Whether that is morally and ethically proper is a whole separate conversation.
Okay. Well, let's circle back around to tradition.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the differences in religion? I know you don't care that I'm Baptist, and you didn't even care that I joined you for a service there, a Catholic service. But it did get under your skin when I screwed up and did one of the traditions wrong, or wasn't supposed to do it either way. Did that kind of get under your skin because apparently you had told me and I just didn't listen? How
do I put this? So basically, we'll do two separate questions here. So the first one, and I'll talk about this a little bit. So I was raised Catholic, and I was never really a strong believer in the faith until I was probably late into my teenage years. But I came to realize, and I kind of went around. I went to some Baptist services, some Methodist services, Jewish Orthodox.
Wow, you did a heck of a lot more exploring than I did there.
Called, yeah. Spoke with a bunch of like Buddhist types and stuff like that, and I realized that I never felt at home anywhere as much as I did in all of the traditions that are a part of the Catholic Mass. And so that's why I stayed, and that's why I continue to attend Mass regularly now that the world's opened back up and all that. I'm going to church in person again.
So you truly did do your due diligence on figuring it out for your religion.
And there are still times, like I'll still occasionally go to a different service or whatever, just kind of for the fun of it. But it's not home,
Yeah.
I have never felt the same connection there.
For me, I never really cared about the traditions, and the more that I read the Bible, which I finished the Bible, by the way, I read all.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the morning of my wedding, I finished the Bible. Is that not cool?
Well, that was a rather convenient timing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So now that I've read the Bible in all of it, I've really, really been reinforced with this idea that Jesus and God, they're one and the same. So Jesus, I'll use them interchangeably, but Jesus specifically talks about the intent behind the things that you do, and he cares not really so much what you say and do, but he cares about what where your heart is with things. Where was I going with this? Traditions and stuff like that. So Lydia and I even went through a premarital counseling.
Always a good idea.
Yep. And one of the questions on the initial questionnaire was, do we stand in the same place on religion and stuff like that? I marked no, she marked yes. So they brought it up and said, well, why do you think that? Where do you guys disagree? And I said, well, she thinks my wife thinks that the Bible is X amount of years, or she thinks the earth is 6,000 years old because the Bible says so. And I think that God speaks us into, in a frame that we can understand it, and the world very well may be millions of years old as we currently understand time. So we have this argument back and forth all the time, and she even brought it up on her honeymoon, like, hey, what are we going to teach our kids? So it's important to us, but that when I brought it up in the premarital counseling, he was like, doesn't matter, you're on the same page. You still believe in God and stuff like that. So it's like all of that stuff is just semantics, right?
Yeah.
God cares not whether you kneel at a wooden altar or pray in the middle of the woods while you're standing, as long as your heart is in the right place. And he doesn't care if you do a water baptism or just spread the word on a street corner and never had your head dunked underwater, I don't think any of that matters. As long as you believe in the same God that I believe in, and you believe that Christ died for our sins and rose 3 days later, I don't care. So I think that was part of my journey, was that, to me, I never really did branch out because it didn't matter to me. All I cared about was, is there a God, yes or no? And am I following him, yes or no? In that capacity, as long as I'm being a good steward of my faith as far as where I read the Bible, like I'm going to read the Bible and translate it for myself. And beyond that, and that's a natural pull that I feel, So I don't really care what everybody else does. And I don't even really care to conform to those religious ideas either. I think everyone should make their own decisions and do what's comfortable for them. And that's another thing too, is I'm thinking about starting my own small group here where I'm at. And I don't know that I want to be affiliated with any one church. I'd like to be on the small group registry for that church, but I just want to be a group of dudes going through the Bible together, I don't want to be I don't want to have to be beholden to the beliefs of that one church.
May have some difficulties there then, but I wish you the best of luck with that.
Yeah, we'll see, for sure.
All right. So there's one more area of tradition that we haven't really touched on yet, and we've already started talking religion, which is one of the sacred cows. So let's just go ahead and hit them all. I want to circle around to politics and kind of, we talked about it briefly earlier, the founding of the country and the ideals of the founding fathers. How much of, the writings of the founding fathers, from the Federalist Papers to the Constitution, how much of that do you think is still valuable? How much do you think still holds water today? Should we continue to review those documents, or are they old news? Should they be cast by the wayside?
Oh, hell no. I think those are the founding documents of our nation, and they all make sense. And I think the founding fathers, like, if you think that these dudes were absolute idiots, and you didn't, like, come on, man. The printing press was invented in their lifetime and things like that. They've seen technological advances. They know that technology is going to advance. So this idea that, like, the world's going to, that they made it for their purposes and it only applied then and there is ridiculous. Like, these men thought forward and knew that they were laying the foundation for a country. And not only that, but even if they didn't know that the world was going to change, their intention was to build a country that would last a very, very long time, if not forever. So I think the intent there was they did do really, really good work to lay a good foundation for things like that. And you also have to read the surrounding paperwork, like you said, the Federalist Papers. That's not a government document. That's just a publicity thing. But it tells you what the intent behind all of these writings is. So especially, and we'll get lost in the weeds with this, but 2A, the Second Amendment, there's an argument that, it was written in the time of muskets and stuff like that. If you thought that George Washington didn't know that they were going to make advances in firearms, knowing that we have gone from bows and arrows to muskets, you're an idiot. And it's going to continue to do so. There will be advances in technology. So even though they didn't foresee social media, for instance, they did foresee that in one way or another, the freedom of speech can be controlled. And they saw it. So like the leap from what we have now to social media is similar to the leap from word of mouth to printing presses. Like, they know that this stuff happens and that the technology advances and changes society in that way. And I think they did a really good job at writing those documentation. So
I think we both agree that a strict interpretation of the Constitution is a good idea, because the documents themselves are solid. And especially if you read the surrounding documentation, the Federalist Papers, and even if you go back earlier, the documents from the French Revolution, the Magna Carta, all of these ideas that came out of that period, they all still hold water today. They're still valuable. You can still learn from them, and they are still an effective framework for governing a country.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also these people that say, they made an amendment process for a reason. It's like, no shit. But let's not amend, like, the first 5 fucking things that they put down, okay? So, yeah, that's where I'm at. And so, review case law all you want and the decisions the Supreme Court made and stuff like that throughout the years, but don't bother with the Constitution. Leave that shit alone and uphold it. That's always the thing that is sworn in by positions of office, is they swear to uphold and defend the Constitution. They don't swear to uphold and review the Constitution. You're not supposed to review the Constitution. You're supposed to review the situation at hand and the law in question, and does that uphold to the Constitution? Does that hold water as far as the Constitution is concerned? Not the other way around. We're not going to adapt the Constitution to make certain things acceptable today. I don't agree with that. Yeah. And this is why I believe that. I think the Constitution is the framework for our government, in that it's not a framework for a failure of any kind, and I don't think that it's a framework for any kind of violence or anything like that. I think the Constitution was made in the way that it is to preserve our freedoms of speech, our freedoms of religion, and our right to bear arms is there to preserve the other two. And then everything else that's in the Constitution is there to guarantee the natural rights that were given to us by God. And we have a framework of government that's supposed to be able to keep itself in check and to keep people upholden to the people of the United States, our elected officials, for instance, there's a reason why they're elected, and they have term limits, and there's checks and balances and things like that, is to keep this as a system that is ultimately bending to the will of the American people and guarantees the rights and freedoms of the American people. And once we start getting into these ideas that we see coming out of the woodworks left and right, for changing those things because it suits a certain idea one way or another, it starts shifting into, okay, now we're stripping away rights instead of protecting rights. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm speaking very vaguely because I'm not very well versed on all the exact wordage on all of this, but yeah.
You get the point.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that's a pretty good place to leave it.
No, I got more. I got more for you if you're here for it.
I don't know.
So,
It's getting late here, man. I'm gonna have to start winding it down.
All right. One more
right,
topic because I put it in the title.
Oh, shit.
So
I thought we covered everything from the title. Whoops.
Nope, I got odd land rights in there. So I've got this idea. So let's talk about these. So like these natural rights and freedoms, right? So like I think there's something that's ignored. The idea of so the way that we have our society set up now is we're just taxed to death. We have all of these payments that you have to make in a typical society. And you can't even stand on certain street corners without, legally you don't have the right to be there forever. You can't sleep anywhere without owning property. It's very hard to simply exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have this concept of, what about the freedom to exist? Why don't we have a freedom to exist? And why isn't that guaranteed in any way, form, or fashion? I would like to see that we would have legislation put in place to guarantee people the right to sleep certain places or just be certain places, as long as you're not being a public nuisance or a danger to society and things like that. So hear me out on this. And this specifically goes, especially when you start talking. Have you ever looked into the van lifestyle? Of course you have. You want a tiny home.
Of course I have.
So just as well as I do that, like, certain parts of the country, it's really, really hard to stay in a place that you're not going to get, much less just being in a place that you're not going to get robbed or hassled. But you can't even park your car and sleep in it for a night without having the cops called on you and having them remove you from the property or tell you to leave,
Yeah.
So, and you're not doing anything. Nobody else was parked there. It's past 10 o'clock at night. Nobody's going to use that spot. You'll be gone in the morning. So what do they care, So I would like to see rights that make bumming it legal.
Yeah. The only problem, and I'll go ahead and play the devil's advocate and the cynic here for you, is that it used to be like that, and that's why those laws were created. Yeah. It's how you end up with people, like the current situation in California, where people sleep on, in tents on the sidewalk and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but then you remove the ability for people to better their situation. They have to stay in big cities and stuff like that for that.
Indeed, you do, and so it's a coin flip either way, right?
Yeah.
And you want to try and create some sort of happy medium there, and the people on one side abuse it, and then the people on the other side lose it.
Right, but we've created this system where you have to live in an apartment complex. You have to pay somebody to be where you're at. You have to have land or, and pay the government for that land consistently. You can't just own land. You can't, and beyond that, you can't just exist without owning land. If you don't own land, you can't be there. And it's kind of ridiculous to me. But what I'd like to see is, I think it would be cool if it were legal to just travel. So, and this is where I have a really hard time balancing my freedoms with other people's freedoms. So it's a tough one to not be hypocritical on. So let's talk about private property. So I'll give you where my idea comes from first. So they used to have this bike park, this mountain biking park in the town that I grew up in. and it was just these trails on some publicly owned land, and they were pretty good. They were just mountain biking trails in the woods. And then this company came in, I think it was like a big bank or something like that, came in, built a corporate office on it. They bought all of the land, only used a portion of it, like less than an acre of it, for a parking lot and a building, but they own the land, can't bike there anymore. Even though the woods are still untouched, undeveloped, mountain biking is very low impact to the environment, especially when the trail was already there to begin with, before the land changed hands. And so why not let mountain bikers keep doing it? And it's because, they'll wreck and sue the owner of the property or whatever. It's like, why?
Liability and security.
Yeah, why? Why don't we have
Because
laws? Yeah, but why don't we have laws that protect property owners from you wandering onto their property and getting hurt on undeveloped, like God put it there, but I'm going to sue AT&T because they built a building and bought this property and didn't address this problem. Like, fuck you. You fell into a creek, dude.
Yeah. Well, and there were some laws like that, and they weren't enough, and the corporations were still losing. And so now you get this.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird. So
Yep.
I have a hard time balancing this idea. So that one kind of screws me up because I wish we could still go to undeveloped property that's privately owned by corporations and stuff like that. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to allow the public to use it for walking trails or biking or something like that, as long as you're not appreciably impacting the development state of that land, or appreciably impacting water directions or runoff and stuff like that. So
Well, what you're proposing is sort of like a system they have in the UK. It's I believe it's called common lands or common property or something like that.
I think they have something like that in Australia too, because I know this one guy that just kind of goes on these odd adventures, and he walks through like farmers' paddocks and stuff like that, these fields, and it seems totally normal to him. He'll hop fences and stuff all the time, and it doesn't seem to, he doesn't bat an eye at it, and he doesn't even look like he's looking over his shoulder. So I think they might have something like that in Australia.
Well, there's basically different tiers to it. Basically, private property is still private property. Public lands are still public lands, and then there's stuff like green spaces, national parks, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also common areas that are said to be open and available for people to use, and that seems like to me the best kind of compromise for this type of system that you're proposing.
So,
and basically what that would mean is that that corporation would only own X amount of the space that they purchased, and they could convert other portions of that space, but as long as that space isn't in active use, it's not technically owned by them.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good. What I was thinking is as far as, so even with like ranchers and stuff like that, where it's the property that you also live on is your, the property that you're using for your business too. So think about that, is they own these huge, beautiful swaths of land that nobody's able to enjoy. And why? For what? So the cows can go graze in the land, and so nobody, drinks too much beer and leaves beer cans lying around. They could do that anyway. So what I would like to see is this idea, and again, I balance this between like the idea of, no, I don't want you on my property, versus, yeah, I want the right to go wherever I want to go. Because both sound attractive, right? Like, you want to own your own property, but at the same time, it would be great if you had the right to go wherever you wanted to, because you're a human being. So what I'd like to see, I keep saying that, and I'm getting to it, damn it, is what if we had like laws that would allow you to travel on private property? So if you're just passing through and you do not stay in one spot longer than 24 hours or appreciably affect the land in any way, so no drilling into trees or putting nails into things or leaving ropes or chains tied around trees, just camping. You pick up, leave no trace, and you're gone. Nobody would ever be the wiser, and you're just gone. But to keep that from, so let's use the example of like farmers or ranchers, in a not so obvious residential area, not an obvious residential area. So not through like neighborhoods or anything like that, but if you wanted to walk through, the Midwest and just cross farm fields and stuff like that, there shouldn't be anything stopping you as long as you're not destroying crops or destroying developed property. And as long as you stay away from residential property. So, or residential developments, I should say. So that means that you shouldn't be. So if you're the property owner, and if. So I'll say this: if I'm the property owner, I don't give a shit if somebody passes through my territory, my property, as long as I never knew they were there. Right? Does that make sense?
It does.
If
And
there's
we
no-
may need to circle back to this again next week. I'll give you the long version, but here the short
so if
version.
there, hang on. So if there were a law saying like, hey, you can't come within eyesight of this person's house, but you could pass through private property, that'd be cool with me. I think that would be pretty ideal. And then obviously you would have to have laws protecting the property owners for liability purposes and things like that. So, yeah.
And see, that's where you get into trouble because you're never going to have any sort of law like that, especially on things like ranches, because there's too great a chance that either somebody gets harmed by the animals or they fall into a pond or a
Or
well,
they leave too many cans in the wrong place and it harms the cattle or something.
or they
like that.
tear up the grass with their four-wheelers.
Yeah.
It's there's too much liability on both sides for that to make any sense legally.
I think there's ideas. We'll get more into it another time, but I think there's ideas where you would have to further define the rights to travel through things like that, where you would have to define, how you can travel, whether it's a vehicle needs to stay on a road or you could walk through a field or whatever. Certain constituents would have to be built in place for that kind of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting concept at the very least, right?
Mhm. Certainly.
So, all right. Well, you want to close this out?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for stopping by, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Sorry we, kind of got off to a rocky start there. Had some technical difficulties, but be back at it again next week. Thank
Yep.
y'all for tuning in.
Yep. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment. All right. Bye.
See you guys.